Boy saved a dying warrior. Then, 200 warriors gave him a family he never had. Dust Creek Valley, Arizona Territory, October 1879. The wind howled across the empty desert, carrying whispers of gunfire and ghosts from forgotten wars. In a small wooden cabin near the canyon edge lived a 14-year-old boy named Eli Carter, a quiet soul who had no one left to call his own. Each day he watched the sun sink behind the red cliffs, wondering if life would ever bring him something more than silence. But that silence shattered one freezing night when Eli saw a trail of blood leading down the dusty road. His heart pounded as he followed it, every step echoing louder in the dark. And then lying beside the rocks he found him, a dying warrior, breath shallow, eyes fierce, and hands clutching a blade stained with battle. Eli didn't know who he was, but something inside whispered that helping this man would change everything forever. The boy's hands trembled as he knelt beside the wounded warrior, the cold wind biting through his thin shirt while the man's breath came in broken gasps. Eli didn't stop to think. Something stronger than fear pushed him forward. The warrior's body was heavy, his chest marked with deep cuts, his face streaked with dried blood and dust. Eli slid his arms under him, struggling to lift even an inch, whispering, "Hold on, sir. Please hold on." The desert night was silent except for the soft scrape of Eli's boots against the stones as he dragged the stranger toward his cabin, every step a battle against exhaustion. When he finally reached the porch, he collapsed beside the man, chest burning, arms shaking, but he didn't give up. Inside the dim cabin, the fire's glow flickered across their faces. Eli tore an old sheet into strips, cleaned the wounds with water from his tin can and wrapped them tight, hoping the bleeding would stop. He didn't know if it was enough, but he couldn't walk away. Hours passed as he sat beside the man, watching the faint rise and fall of his chest, afraid that each breath might be the last. The man's lips moved once, whispering something Eli couldn't understand, a word that sounded ancient, maybe a name. The boy leaned closer, desperate to hear more. But the man slipped into silence again. Outside, thunder rumbled across the valley, and Eli felt a strange sense of fate, as if the storm itself had brought this man to his door. He poured a little water between the warrior's lips, brushed the dirt from his forehead and tried to stay awake, his mind spinning with questions. Who was he? Why was he attacked? And what if the men who did this came back? The thought made Eli's stomach twist, yet he couldn't abandon him. He moved closer to the window, peering through the rain-soaked glass, half expecting shadows to appear in the darkness. But there was nothing, only the sound of the storm and the faint crackle of the fire. When he turned back, the warrior's eyes were open. They were sharp, dark, and filled with something fierce. Pain, maybe, or power. Eli froze, unsure what to say, until the man's voice broke the silence, weak but commanding. "Why did you help me?" Eli swallowed hard. "Because no one else would," he answered quietly. The warrior's gaze softened, and his head tilted slightly in acknowledgement before he drifted back into unconsciousness. Eli stayed beside him through the night, feeding the fire, guarding the door, and praying the man would live until sunrise. As dawn crept over the horizon, painting the desert gold, Eli felt a strange calm settle over him. He didn't know the man's name, his story, or the danger that followed him, but something deep inside whispered that this rescue was no accident. Whatever destiny had begun that night was only just unfolding, and Eli Carter had already stepped into a world far greater than his own. The morning sun spilled through the cabin window, lighting the dust that floated in the air like golden mist, and Eli watched as the warrior slowly opened his eyes for the first time since that stormy night. His strength was returning, though his face still showed the marks of battle and the weight of pain buried deep inside him. For days, Eli cooked what little food he had, shared his water, and stayed close, waiting for the stranger to speak again. When he finally did, his voice was low, steady, and filled with stories that carried the sound of distant drums and lost firelight. He told Eli his name, Kale, once the chief of a proud tribe that had roamed the desert long before the white towns and railroads came. He spoke of a land that had been taken from his people, of warriors who fought bravely but vanished into the dust, and of promises broken by men who never knew the meaning of honor. Eli sat silently, eyes wide, every word cutting through the stillness like an echo from another world. He could almost see it all, the camps under the stars, the horses running free, the laughter of children before the wars began. Kale's stories filled the empty space inside him, and for the first time Eli felt something like belonging, as if he too was part of a story bigger than his loneliness. Days passed and Kale grew stronger. He would sit outside during the evenings, the firelight flickering against his scarred face, and tell Eli about courage, loyalty, and the duty of those who protect others even when the world turns against them. The boy listened as if each word carried a heartbeat, something he had missed all his life. Yet beneath that peace, a quiet tension began to grow. One night, While Kale sharpened his old blade, Eli noticed how his eyes kept drifting toward the canyon ridge, watching the horizon as though he expected someone, or something, to appear. The boy asked softly what he was looking for, and Kale replied in a tone that made Eli's chest tighten. "The men who tried to kill me never leave their work undone." Those words settled heavy in the air. The night wind shifted, carrying with it a strange stillness that made the valley feel alive, listening. Kyle rose and placed a hand on Eli's shoulder, his grip firm yet protective. "If they come," he said, "you hide until I call your name. Promise me that." Eli nodded, though fear coiled inside him like a shadow he couldn't shake. When the fire died, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing distant sounds he couldn't name, hooves maybe, or just the wind pretending to be something worse. And in that fragile silence, Eli understood that the world outside his small cabin was changing again, that the danger Kale carried had found its way to Dust Creek Valley, and that whatever came next would test everything he had learned about courage, trust, and family. The next morning began in silence, the kind of silence that feels alive, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Eli woke to the faint tremor of the ground beneath his bed, thinking it was thunder. But when he stepped outside, the air felt different, thick, charged, and humming with something powerful. The valley stretched wide before him, bathed in soft light, and then he heard it, deep, rhythmic, echoing through the hills like the heartbeat of the desert itself. Drums. Slow at first, then growing louder, steadier until the sound seemed to shake the sky. Eli's heart raced as he followed the noise to the ridge, and there, on the horizon, he saw them. Riders, hundreds of them, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. The sight was unreal. Horses covered in dust, spears gleaming, flags of woven cloth fluttering in the wind. 200 warriors moving in perfect rhythm, their faces painted, their eyes sharp, and their presence fierce enough to silence every bird in the canyon. Kale stepped out beside him, his expression unreadable, the morning light revealing a strength that had returned to his body, but also a sadness that never truly left his eyes. Eli watched as Kale lifted his arm, a single motion that carried both authority and welcome, and in response, the warriors slowed, forming a vast circle around the cabin. The drums ceased, replaced by the sound of hooves striking stone and the soft hiss of the wind weaving between them. For a moment no one spoke. Then a tall rider dismounted and walked forward, his voice breaking the stillness. "We searched for you, Chief Kael," he said, his tone filled with reverence. Kale nodded, his gaze firm but heavy with memory. "I am here because of him," he said quietly, turning toward Eli. Every warrior's eyes followed, and Eli felt the weight of 200 stares pressing on his chest, not with threat but with something strange. Respect. The tall rider looked at the boy, studying him, then knelt on one knee. "The boy saved our chief," he said, his words carrying through the ranks. "He saved our spirit." One by one, the warriors bowed their heads, a wave of silent gratitude that made Eli's throat tighten. He didn't know what to do. He just stood there, breath trembling, unsure how a boy who once had nothing could now stand in the center of something so great. Kale placed a hand on his shoulder, speaking softly. "They see your heart, Eli. That is what binds men stronger than blood." The moment was almost sacred, but beyond the peace, Eli caught movement at the far edge of the valley. Small, dark figures flickering against the light, too distant to name, but close enough to know they were not friends. Kale saw it too. His expression hardened, the calm in his eyes shifting into resolve. "They found us," he murmured. The drums began again, slow and steady. Not a song of arrival this time, but a call to prepare. The warriors straightened, horses snorting, weapons lifting toward the dawn. And as the echo rolled across Dust Creek Valley, Eli realized the quiet life he once knew was gone forever, replaced by a storm he was now a part of. The horizon burned red as the dust began to rise, and Eli felt the air shift into something heavy, electric, and alive with danger. The shapes he had seen earlier were no longer shadows. They were riders, fast and merciless, tearing through the canyon with rifles glinting in the light. The sound of their horses roared through the valley like thunder, and within seconds the peace of the morning vanished beneath the scream of war. Kyle gave a sharp command, and the warriors moved as one, forming a half-circle that guarded the cabin and the boy. Eli's pulse hammered in his chest, fear clawing at him, but when he looked at Kale, the chief's calm, steady eyes silenced it. Without hesitation, Eli grabbed the small revolver his father once owned, the same weapon he had never dared to use, and took his place beside the warriors. The first gunshot cracked through the wind, and chaos erupted. Horses charged, arrows flew, and the valley filled with the sound of battle. Eli crouched behind a rock, firing when he could, every shot echoing through his bones. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he was brave. When one of the raiders broke through the line and rushed toward Kale, Eli didn't think. He ran. The man's eyes locked on him, but before he could raise his weapon, Eli slammed into him, knocking him from his horse. The impact sent both tumbling into the dirt, and the gun flew from the raider's hand. Eli grabbed it, hands trembling, and fired once, the recoil jolting through his body. The sound stopped the world for a moment. Kale's voice called out his name, firm and proud, before turning back to lead his warriors. The fight raged on, dust turning the sky gold and red. The raiders pushed hard, but Kale's warriors moved like water, fast, silent, unbreakable. Eli fought beside them, his fear melting into instinct, his heart pounding with something fierce and pure. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes, and when the last echo of battle faded, the valley fell into stillness once more. The sun hung low, painting everything in firelight, and the air smelled of smoke and sweat and victory. Eli stood at the center of it all, chest heaving, dirt on his face, eyes wide with disbelief that he was still standing. The warriors began to gather, their leader stepping forward. Kale looked at Eli, his expression full of pride. "You fought like a man of our blood," he said, his voice carrying through the quiet. The warriors lifted their weapons in unison, their chant rising into the sky. "Taya Shen," one shouted. "Owai." Eli didn't understand until Kale translated softly, "The boy with the brave heart." The sound of it rolled through the canyon like a promise, echoing off the rocks until it became part of the land itself. And as the sun sank behind the cliffs, peace returned to Dust Creek Valley, born from courage, loyalty, and the heart of a boy who no longer stood alone. The evening settled over Dust Creek Valley like a memory too beautiful to fade, the air still carrying the echo of drums and the scent of victory. Eli stood beside Kale, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. The chief's voice was calm but heavy with meaning as he told Eli he could return to the town beyond the desert, or stay and ride with the tribe as one of their own. The choice burned in Eli's chest, but his heart already knew the answer. With tears glistening in his eyes, he whispered, "I have nowhere else to go." Kale nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder, the weight of it both blessing and bond. As night fell, 200 warriors gathered beneath the crimson sky, their voices rising in a chant that carried across the valley. Eli felt it in his soul. He wasn't lost anymore. He was home.